We would have parties at our house, and while that was going on, I couldn't even escape to my bedroom because nobody was looking for me, and he would find me in there. This went on for 4 years until I was 14, and nobody knew. My childhood was a bit rocky. My mom and dad got divorced when I was very young, and at a young age, I knew I was different, but I didn't really know why. But I just felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame growing up. My mom remarried a third time. This man had 3 adult children, and I was about 10 years old when they first started dating. And so I was the only one living at my mom's house. So when she would go on dates or they would have events to go to or whatever, I would get babysat by one of the three. There was 2 girls and a boy, so either my stepsisters or my stepbrother. And pretty soon, my stepbrother started me. We were having a get together at our house, and he asked my mom if I could take a ride with him to his house. It was about 15 minutes away that he forgot something. And my mom was like, yeah, sure. He pulled over into a church parking lot, which is kind of ironic, and proceeded to ask me if I had ever kissed anybody before. So he took it upon himself to show me how to do that. And that was the first time that started. As a kid, I was like, is this normal? He ended up telling me, don't tell anybody about this. So I just sat with this for a while and kept happening. Even in my bedroom, we would have parties at our house. And while that was going on, I couldn't even escape to my bedroom because nobody was looking for me, and he would find me in there. This went on for 4 years until I was 14, and nobody knew. By the time I was 14, I think he was around 30. But then when I was 14, I really started acting out. My mom didn't know what was going on with me, and I didn't know what to do. I felt like, he threatened me not to tell anybody and told me that if I did tell anybody, nobody would believe me. So I never told anybody. I got to a point where I was so depressed. I hated my life so much that I didn't care what he did to me. And so one day I just mustered up all the courage I could get. And when he tried to advance on me, I just put my foot down and I said, this is not happening and it's never going to happen again. I think he was kind of taken back by the fact that I stood up for myself for the first time, and kind of surprised there wasn't a lot of pushback. And, he tried to gaslight me at first and, make me feel like I was being crazy. And I just said, no, this is done. This has to stop. After that, it kind of turned into, I could see a little bit of fear in his eyes that I was going to tell somebody. And so he started with the, you can't tell anybody. Nobody's going to believe you anyway, this and that. And at that point in time, I wasn't even thinking about telling anybody else. I just wanted it to stop. And so it did. But the effect that it had on me did not go away, and it just ate at me. I ended up telling my best friend. I don't really know how much later it was. I mean, it could have been like 6 months to a year after it stopped. But I told her. She happened to be dating my brother, my older brother at the time, and she told my brother. And that's kind of when everything blew up. My brother ended up telling my mom. And so next thing I know, I walk into the house and my mom's sitting in the living room with my stepdad, and she tells me to come sit down. And she basically just started immediately crying, asked me if it was true, and I said, yeah, it was. So she told me that I didn't have to worry anymore. He wouldn't be allowed at the house, and I was protected. It was maybe a month later. My mom and I were sitting in our living room, and the whole back of our house was glass windows, and we saw him walk into our backyard, and I just panicked. I froze, and my mom got upset and jumped up, and he was out in the backyard with my stepdad, and my dad got in a big fight, and he ended up leaving. They began to fight more than what they were already fighting, and everything just started kind of crumbling, and I felt guilty. I felt like everything was my fault, and it just got worse and worse. But that pretty much started the end of their relationship. And my mom got really depressed, and I kind of moved into my teenage years. I didn't know how to cope with everything that had happened in my life up until that point. My mom just didn't know what to do. And so I just really fell in with a bad crowd of people. I was, doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, and got in trouble a couple of times with the law. And my mom just didn't know what to do. She tried to bring me to a therapist, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So it was a really rough time. But in my senior year, I got kicked out Catholic high school for being gay, and that really sort of pushed me even further down. My self self-worth was at an all-time low, and I just really didn't have any direction. I didn't know where I was going in life. I basically spent my 20s bartending and just trying to shove down past traumas, any bad memories that I had, just tried to outrun them, which, obviously is not a thing. But then right before I turned 30, I found aviation and I absolutely loved it. And I went on an introductory flight with a female instructor and I absolutely loved it. That turned everything around for me. I all of a sudden had purpose and direction and knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I started on the road towards becoming a pilot. I got a job working at an FBO, which is a fixed base operator. So I worked there for 4.5 years while I took flight lessons and also enrolled myself in an online college and ended up getting a degree in aviation administration. And over the 4.5 years, I got my certificates and all the ratings that I needed to get a job. And I got a job doing a pipeline patrol in Louisiana, where I grew up. And that was basically just flying really slow and low altitudes, kind of a monotonous job. But it was an entry-level position, and I gladly accepted that. And I did that for a couple of years. And then in that time, I met my wife and we got married. Eventually, I had gotten enough experience to move on and get a better job. And that ended up being in Connecticut, where we live now. You have to have thick skin and you have to be able to keep fighting for yourself. And I think a lot of us female pilots hold ourselves to a higher standard because we're scrutinized more. We started going to a fertility clinic and she got pregnant with our first child. And in January, we had made some doctor's appointments back in Louisiana. So I went to my mammogram and there was a spot of concern that they saw. Long story short on that one, the biopsy came back malignant. I had breast cancer. It was stage 1, so it was a bit tough of a time period, taking that news and digesting it by myself. And I had a double mastectomy in February of 2020 and recovered from that. 2020, I know for a lot of people was a bad year, but it was definitely a bad year for us. We moved up to Connecticut and everything was pretty good for about 4 years. I went through a series of promotions at my job. Then in May of 2024, I had a routine checkup with my oncologist. And a few days later, we got the results. It was, in fact, malignant again. And I was pretty devastated. So now I was stage 4 metastatic, had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And of course, she was devastated. I got grounded from flying again. And it's been just over a year now of going through just a roller coaster. I was having a really tough time. I just started reading and educating myself. And that kind of started what I called my yes phase. And that if it wasn't going to hurt me, then I wanted to try it because, I had nothing to lose. I flipped the table and took control of what I could. And so I just dove in 100% completely committed to doing whatever I could. Started going to therapy for the first time in my life. Once I had addressed all these other areas, I knew that this one final thing was the last thing, the last piece. And I really feel like all the trauma that I had dealt with as a kid that I buried deep down, it didn't go away. With therapy, I started addressing all the childhood traumas and facing them head on, becoming open about who I am. I felt that part of my healing journey was to start sharing my story and hopefully it'll help somebody else. It was a couple years later. I was about to turn 40 and my wife asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and both of my brothers had just done an ancestry kit. And they were just, talking about how cool it was to see those results. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. I did the ancestry kit and it came back that the guy that I thought was my dad was not, in fact, my dad. The guy that she had an affair with turned out to be my biological father. And so at 40 years, it was certainly a shock. I just started thinking about my childhood, and I took some time to process everything and what I was feeling. And I wasn't mad at my mom, and I was just grateful that she, told me the truth. I didn't do anything wrong when I was a kid to make my dad not like me. He wasn't actually my dad, and I think he knew that the whole time. It was a relief in one way. I had a little bit of anger in another, but I processed it all, and I talked to my mom about it, and I said, I want to see if he'll meet me or just talk to me. I'd really like to, at the very least, have a conversation with him. And so we ended up meeting him, and it was amazing. I met this whole big family that I never knew existed, and they were all so loving and so welcoming. But it also made me really sad because I felt like my childhood could have been the complete opposite of what it was. I think that had things not played out the way that they did, I wouldn't have the story that I have now to help other people. I have a Substack page that I started writing on, and I've shared openly about what it's like having cancer. I went through radiation, and I had another surgery over the past year, and I had some battles with a chemo pill. My body just wasn't handling it. So there was a lot of ups and downs and a lot of stories in there. I highly encourage somebody that's been through a situation like that to get help and to go to therapy. As far as cancer goes, I think it's really important to have a support system, and not only of family and friends, but also somebody that knows what you're going through. So it's really important to find a community in some way, whether it's online or in person. If it's just one person that's kind of going through what you're going through, I highly recommend finding some kind of community and being able to talk about it. But also with cancer, knowing that you don't have to just do everything that the doctor says. And I'm not saying Western medicine is bad. I've done the Western medicine incorporated with all my other therapies that I've learned over the past year. But you do have power, and it helps mental health to sort of take that power back and control what you can. Whether it's changing your diet or exercising, there are things that you can do that help your body get healthy again and help it fight cancer. Because laying in bed crying is not the remedy. Although it's important, to go through the emotions of it and process it. I've been working with Susan G. Komen, which is a breast cancer organization here in the United States. I've joined their Metastatic Breast Cancer Steering Committee. I'm trying to get involved in any way that I can to kind of pave the way for other women and hopefully make it easier for them. And hopefully I have a bigger project coming up that starts in the fall. I'm finding that doors are opening in the direction that I'm supposed to be going.